Francis Sweetwater Jr. My father was Southern Cheyenne, full-blood Southern Cheyenne, and my mom was Osage, full-blood Osage. My dad lived in western Oklahoma where the Cheyennes were located, and my mom lived around, I guess you'd call it the kind of eastern part of Osage country. Osage County, Pawhuska, Ponca City. It's a big county. I was born here. I was born in Ponca City. War broke out. My dad, he couldn't get into service because he was 4F. So he moved us to California, Los Angeles area. We had I had great parents. My mom and dad were good. LA I couldn't really do. I was on the wild side. And my wife was, my late wife was full-blood Cheyenne. And I told her, I said, I can't make it here in LA. So we moved here because we'd come to Wichita to visit my aunt. It was a struggle at first, you know. We had 4 kids, had a lot of jobs. And then I finally got on a Beech aircraft, and I retired there for 35 years. Finally straightened around. I was like a lot of young Indians, had problems with alcohol. I'm a recovering alcoholic. Haven't had a drop in, I think, probably about 48 years. And it was a struggle. And my wife, but if it wasn't for my wife, I would be dead today. She was a lot. She was there for me. She wouldn't.
And what was her name?
Victoria.
Okay.
Yeah. Her last name was Hallencrane, her dad. And I asked her one time, I said, wouldn't you rather stay? And she said, I wouldn't change my life for anything. She said, when I moved. Back in my generation, never thought about it. I knew I was, I would say, 4 years old, you know. I was back then. We were Indians, and I know how things change, you know. From generation now, they Native American, indigenous, and I always said I was born Indian. I'm going to die Indian. I mean, I don't disrespect what they want to be called, you know. That don't bother me a bit. But I'm an Indian, I'm American Indian. And when I was 7 years old, my dad and mom made me and my brother dance outfits and made us start dancing. You didn't say no back in them days. I guess I was in probably at least 4 or 5, and I'm an Indian, you know. I didn't think nothing of it, you know. And I went through out in California. Everything there was pretty acceptable, you know. I mean, there was racism, sure, a lot of the blacks, but it never out there. It never touched me. No, but my wife was telling me about where she lived in Clinton, Oklahoma. She was from the area my dad was from. And it's still there in Oklahoma. You know, it's not just as transparent as it was back in them days. And I mean, there's little towns there that still have the Klan. Mm-hmm. And first time I tasted discrimination, I was about maybe 12 years old. We was in Oklahoma. We was going back to LA, and we went in one Chinese restaurant. They wouldn't serve us because we were Indian, and that always stuck in my mind. And the thing, and my wife used to say when she was in Oklahoma, she said, if your car broke down people would drive by you. You were just in this broke down car. I didn't know him. His last name was Bates. He was full-blood Osage, and I had heard that they had killed him, but I always thought they got shot. They shot him. But I was talking to my nephew, and he said they poisoned him. He said where he was at, he come home. They said he been feeling well. He was staggering, and then he just fell over. They wanted his money. He was one of the Indians that and I don't know how they was. That's all the killings was based on. Was money. They wanted to get his head rights. He had quite a few head rights back then, but it was about money. They was trying to get his money. The Osages. Once a year, they have a ceremonial. They call it Heyoshka. It's war dancing, but you got a protocol to follow those certain ways. It's not a powwow. Of course, all the tribes have their ceremonial dances. I don't know about a lot of them. A lot of the other tribes that participate in the powwow world now are given that war dance, and because that war dance comes from up north, Sioux and Cheyenne. And when they come down here, of course, a lot of other tribes, they call it the war dance. And a lot of people think, well, that war dance, when they sing the war dance, we're going to war. The Cheyennes, we call them war journey songs. They're a round dance, and that's for the warriors that are going to war. Then when they come home, that's when they sing the war dance, the Cheyennes. I've been asked to be a pit dancer, Oklahoma, different states. Met a lot of great guys, a lot of people. And I like the contest. They have contests, and I was a straight dancer. And I always told people, I said, I don't dance for the money, but don't get me wrong. If I win, I can use it, but I don't dance for it. I dance for the pure. I just love it. I miss it so much when I go. I can't go to dances anymore and count them when I drive, and then I have to leave before it gets dark. But it's just like I know some of these young men now. I mean, they're like his name's Sidney Topak. I remember him when he moved up here. He married my friend's granddaughter, and he's come a long way now. Man, he's a popular head singer. I had a nephew, Cheyenne nephew. He was in the Marine Corps in Vietnam, and he called me. He lived in Oklahoma. He called me one time. What do you need? He says, I want you to listen to a couple of songs. One was a gourd dance song, and one was a chief song or a veteran song. I don't know what he really called it, but it was a war dance song. I said, man, them are beautiful songs, Johnny. He says, his uncle, he says, I composed them. I want to give them to you. They're your songs. And I called my dad. And I said, Dad, what Johnny did, I said, I didn't have anything to give you. He says, no. He says, we don't do that, Cheyennes, we don't do that. We don't give them something like that. And I just started dancing. When I first got into that, I was a fancy dancer. And then I wasn't a very good fancy dancer. But I went, then I started, my mom, of course, they're straight dancers, so I started straight dancing. I straight danced, and I danced for about 5 years, and I would get in contests. And one time I got picked for the first round, and I danced one round, and then I was eliminated. I said, I think I could. So I started practicing. I practiced till the very end, till I quit. For me, it's to believe in how your regalia is, whether you be a traditional dancer or whether you be a grass dancer or a northern dancer. It's just it comes from your heart, them songs. They're like medicine to me. A lot of dancers, you get out there and them songs, for me, a lot of them dancers, and even the gourd dance, them songs they can be medicine for me, and the Kiowas made the dance popular, but the Cheyennes did the gourd dance also, and there's kind of controversy there. But I had people tell me that the Kiowa gourd dance was given to them. There's a story behind it, and I don't want to repeat it because I might mess it up. And it concerned a red wolf, an animal. And I asked my dad, I said, how did we get it? Cheyenne. He says, he said it was for the warriors. Because a lot of little things you got to remember from tribe to tribe. The Kiowas, when they gourd dance, they got a starting song. And they'll sing that song 4 times through. They'll beat the drum. And then when they get to finish that 4th song, and they hit that drum, and then everybody gets up. The Cheyennes, we use the same song, but they get up right away. And the reason for that is because we don't wait on things. Go. And that's just, the way we look at the gourd dance. Well, like the Osages, originally I believe they were from down south, and then that's where when they moved to all tribes they could get, they put them in Oklahoma. Cheyennes are from Wisconsin, that's what I think, I'm not for sure. When they moved us all here, a lot of them didn't like it. Some of them fought their way back. Some of them stayed here. You don't hear much of it. They call it the Battle of the Ouachita.
Yeah.
And it was... He was a peace chief, the story that I was told. The Cheyennes, we got 19 chiefs and 1 war chief. My dad was a chief, and today I'm a chief. And I was down there, I had to go down to Oklahoma when my wife passed away. We go through a little ceremony after a mourning period. We get painted and we're released. So I went down there and saw this. He was my mentor, and I really looked up to that. Getting old, can't think of his name. But anyway, I went down there to have him paint me. He went through the ceremony, of course, giving him something, and then he said, Francis, he said, we got some kids from a university around Amarella. He said they're looking for a battle site, and they was trying to find the battle site. He said, you want to go? Yeah. I went, never did find it, but I thought that was pretty interesting, because I really, he's the one, when my dad passed away, he said, before he passed away, he said, did your dad ever talk to you about, you or your brother about being a chief? I said, no. And it's not passed down. But my dad was there, he was still alive, but anyway, I guess he chose me. And they told me that you got to go through 4 years initiation. It's not a big deal. What they do is they watch you for 4 years to see, and they check on you before to see what kind of life you're leading, And when you're ready, we'll bring you in the teepee, and then we'll go through the ceremony. And so I went through it, did what I had to do down in Colony, Oklahoma. My niece called me and said, she says we gotta feed everybody. But all the chiefs that get initiated that day to become a chief, they all cook in their own camps, and then you bring the food out there and feed everybody. And so that's what we did. But this is the only time we were in the teepee, and that's the only time the chiefs can eat first. His name was Alfred Heap of Birds. He was the main.
Alfred what?
Heap of Birds.
Heap of Birds.
Yeah, he was Cheyenne. Took me, and then he was like a brother. His name was Moses Starr. He was Cheyenne and Arapaho. He really liked my dad. He really, and my dad, and I didn't know this. We went down there to the colony, and Moses come over to me, called me Junior. He said, Junior, he says, chiefs are setting up their teepee. I want you to come in. I said, I'm not a chief. He says, I know. He says, we want you to come in. My dad, he says, your dad told me to take you under my wing and teach you. So I went in.
We're there.
This is Mother Earth. And I hate to see the way it's abused today. When the Osages dance, we carry a dancing stick. And then you dance, and you use it now with rhythm of the drum. My mom told me that stick, she says, don't touch the ground with it. We don't pierce Mother Earth. But some tribes do, but that's the Osage belief. Today I even think more about what's going on in this, how the world's being abused. And, I said, I know the Creator's looking down, and I just hope it, for all of my grandkids and great grandkids, that they can enjoy the things I did on this earth. And we was down in Comanche country, Comanche homecoming, to dance and take part. We had friends down there, all of us, and they said, Lawrence says, Francis, we want to talk to you, me and Wiley. I said, okay. So we sat down, I said, what's up? They said, this past year, whenever you contested, you haven't been going nowhere. I said, yeah. I said, I noticed that. I said, I just figured they were tired of me. I said, when I dance, I said, I don't dance for money. And I said, I don't dance for, he said, that's the reason why. He says, did you think somebody put medicine on you? I said, well, it crossed my mind. But I said, I didn't go no further. They said, we think you did. Somebody put medicine on you. And he says, we're going to give you something. And it was from the creekside. I can't remember. They gave me a little jar of water that looked like a little piece of wood in there. Then they gave me some soap. They said, use that for 5 days. Put that water on you, bathe in that soap for 5 days. I believe there's just bad people out there. And there was a powwow here in Wichita that weekend, 3-day powwow. And I can't remember if I come second or first. And you talk about, people, I said, I told them, I said, you got to be careful out there, you know. I said, there's some people jealousy. I said, they'll put medicine on you. I heard some stories, and I believe them. They were true. This one man, him and his wife, they were second box. He was real popular, him and his wife. They go to powwows, and she'd always be there to support him. And then one powwow, she said, I'm not going to go. Her husband called a medicine man. He come over to the house, their house. He looked at her, talked to her, and prayed, touched her, and he said, then he grabbed her, he said, she took his hand and went like that to her hair. And he said, it was full of black stuff. There's men that's like, you know, like I always tell these people, I said, you know, if you believe in the good guy, the bad guy's out there too.
But what does Sweetwater mean?
I was trying to figure that out because I had asked my dad, because that's all my grandpa would be calling Sweetwater.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, Dad, I said, what about your mom? I didn't know she died. He says, I said, what was her name? He says, God, he says, all they ever called her was old woman. And I said, well, Dad, well, she had to be young sometime. He said, that's all I knew. He said, so we just called her, they just called her old woman. I just kind of figured it's something, whether it's right or wrong, I can't tell you. That Sweetwater was probably my grandpa's name, Indian name. And my dad's Indian name was Buffalo. When they made him go to school, he was 7 years old. They put him in school 3 times. He run away. The third time they made him stay. They caught him and they watched him. And he couldn't speak English. He said, so we got there and he says, this teacher come up and she said, she asked me my name. And he says, I had a friend there. He was with me. He said, his name was George. And he said, she said, I didn't know what she was saying. He said, what's your name? And his buddy said, his name's George. He said, I went by George for a long time, and the teacher named him Francis. My grandpa, the only grandpa I knew, Sweetwater, we went to where he lived, there was a man of moment taking care of him in an old wooden shack, really. And I was trying to remember this family that's taking care of him. I think their name was Hellman Hall. I think I was about 12 years old. We went up to see my grandpa. And my grandpa would look at me, and I just look at him. I just couldn't talk to him. I didn't speak Cheyenne. And then my dad told my mom, he said, I think his name was Hellman Hawk, he's Cheyenne man, and his wife. He said they want to give him an Indian name. And they said it's Black Rock. That's my Indian name. Rod Pocowatch, his mama, when his grandma died, her mama, and Lena, I was living up in Oklahoma. And Cheyenne called me and said, Lena passed away. I said, okay, I'll be there tomorrow. So I come down and I went over to where Deanie was at. And, she said, Francis, I want to talk to you. I said, sure. She said, I want to ask you something. Yes, okay. She said, we're having services at the funeral home, but we're going to have the burial in Pawnee, Oklahoma. That's where she was from. She says, could you come down and read for us? I said, yeah. Well, I said, I'll be at the funeral home. And then we got down to the funeral home. She says, Francis, I said, what? She says, that pastor Mama wanted, she says, I never did really care for him. And she says, can you run it? I said, what? She said, wing it.
Oh, that is funny.
So I said, okay. I said, I'll do the best I can. And then her mama, when I was a friend of Comanche, we were brothers, made each other brothers. He passed away. And the family asked me if I would, they asked me, I said, okay. So I got up there, read what the family wanted me to read, and I talked about my little Comanche brothers there, and Deanie, and Rod's mom says, she says, Deanie told me, she says, Deanie, she says, Mom told me, she says, well, something happened to her, she says, I want him to read for me.
I love that.
Cheyenne Way, one of the chief's things. People ask you to do something, my dad always told me. He says, if you got the right to do it, never say no. Mm-hmm. Never ask for anything. And that's the way I live. Even in the powwow world, when they ask you to be head dancer, they just ask, I say, yeah, I'll be there. I don't ask them for nothing. Phoenix, I was asked to be head dancer out there. And we was at a powwow in Tonkawa, and Andy come up. He says, son, I said, yeah, how you doing, Andy? He says, I hear you're going to be head dancer out west. I said, yeah, I'm going to Phoenix. He said, do you know why they ask you so much to be head dancer? And I said, I thought about it. I said, me and my wife, we were just, a lot of head dancers got big families and they get a lot of support. I said, it was basically me and Vicky. And I said, I don't know. I said, I wondered about that. I said, 'cause when we go to dance, I said, just really, I don't have no blood family that supports me. Not, it didn't bother me one way or the other. But I said, he says, that's why. He says, they respect you. And he said, and you're a warrior. He said, that's why they ask you. And he told me the same thing my dad told me. Whenever they ask you to go do something, son, don't ask for nothing.